This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. I am your host, Darren McKee, and with me, as usual, is Adam Gardner.
Que pasa, cuboids?
Thank you, Adam. We have a great show for you today. I'm going to give you a little book review of Peter Attia's Outlive. But first, Adam, were some unknown remains presented to the Congress of Mexico that turned out to be aliens?
Maybe.
Oh.
So last fall, there were some beings which resembled aliens revealed to Mexico's Congress. I was keen to look at it for the show, but we had other stuff going on and I never really got around to it. But I did want to get back to it and cover this somewhat silly story.
The aliens thank you for your attention.
I hope so. Aliens, if you're real and you're listening to this, I'm sorry for, suggesting you don't exist. I think our listeners are probably not inclined to believe this kind of story. I get that. I think it's important to be somewhat open-minded for these kind of things and try to analyze the evidence and dismiss it if that evidence is not reliable. Personally, and I've mentioned this before, I think the idea of aliens existing makes sense. I think there are probably aliens somewhere in the universe. I don't necessarily believe that there has been strong evidence that aliens have been to Earth, or at least in our lifetime.
Yeah, in the short cases, the universe is so big, and there's so many stars, and there's so many planets which seem like they could be habitable in a certain way, that there's a plausible reason that there's life forms which could be intelligent to the extent that we would call them aliens versus just microbial.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Darren. Now, I find the idea of aliens compelling. I would be happy to see reliable evidence of their existence. I would be happy to see reliable evidence of them having been here, even though that might be a bit scary too. So, what happened in Mexico?
What happened in Mexico?
These alien bodies were presented by Jamie Maussan, a journalist who was once described as a ufologist, now self-described as a unidentified anomalous phenomena researcher, which fits with the general rebranding of UFOs to UAPs. He claims that these specimens were found in Peru and presented them at Mexico's first congressional hearing on UFOs. He does not necessarily claim that they are aliens, even though I keep calling them aliens. He basically says they are non-human, and he doesn't know exactly what they are. Claims that testing showed that these creatures are about 1,000 years old. If you've not seen the photos, you should check it out. These are somewhat typical looking aliens as depicted in popular culture. Elongated heads, 3 fingers on each hand. They look a bit like E.T. They appear to be mummified, but they are humanoid, right? They have a head, 2 arms, 2 legs. Look like they probably would have stood upright when they were alive. Somewhat human shaped, but very small. Is this in itself suspicious? It depends on what you believe. If you believe that alien sightings have been going on for a while, and that the way they are depicted in popular culture is a reflection of those actual aliens, this might be expected. If you believe that the public perception of what is a typical alien would look like is inspired by what people imagine them to look like on TV and movies and stuff like that, then this is evidence against it being real. We shouldn't expect real aliens to look like they do on TV. Personally, I'd say anything resembling a Grey or an E.T. type alien is probably not what a real alien would look like. There's a lot of life on Earth. The idea that a being from another planet would look more humanoid than almost any other species on Earth seems really far-fetched, though perhaps one could make some sort of argument for convergent evolution, something like that. Similar evolved solutions to a similar problem will happen with evolved intelligent organisms. So basically, humanoid traits, walking upright, having your head at the top of your body, things like that. On the other hand, an alien may look as far from us as something like a squid or a flower does to a human. So we wouldn't recognize them as that.
Like in the movie Arrival.
Oh, yeah.
You sort of have to picture, though, like the alien that's going to cross interstellar space. Right? Like we talked about this before. They're going to be some sort of robot. Probably. But let's imagine they have some sort of, we'll say flesh, for lack of a better phrase. It would have to be flesh in a way that would work with our atmosphere, or they're wearing some sort of armor or suit or mecho suit, right? So then would it be humanoid-ish anyway? I mean, it could be quadrupedal, but it could have also many legs. You could imagine, I guess you said like some octopus, but then it would have to be adapted in some way, right, to our living arrangement.
Yeah, there's a lot of excuses you can make for why it would look human. Oh, they cross with human DNA to be able to survive on our atmosphere, or it's a robot that's made to look more like us so that it can get around in our gravity and in our, in our environment. You can come up with a million excuses, probably.
We thought you would feel less threatened if we looked like you.
Maybe
that old one.
It's like, you just look really creepy to us. Like, if you showed up as a flower, I would have been less scared than if you look like this weird gray alien. But whatever. There's some uncanny valley stuff going on there.
Or the Predator.
Oh yeah, Predator's pretty cool looking with the big dreads and everything. Yeah. But again, he doesn't say it's an alien, so maybe there's another reason for this thing looking like a human. Am I being too charitable by coming up with these excuses? Maybe. Maybe it's a time traveler. Maybe they're from another dimension that's somewhat similar to ours and had mostly similar evolution until something. Maybe they're somewhat related to humans somehow because we're all aliens, or who knows. Right? Maybe Earth was seeded by aliens, and that's why they look like us.
Oh, that's what you meant. Some sort of panspermia hypothesis. That makes a bit more sense. Life came from Mars, and then, okay, that's versus like we're all aliens. Like, what does that even mean, right?
Yeah.
We're all aliens to someone else. If we ever go anywhere, like, oh, the aliens is us.
They're like, what are you guys talking about? We're pretty surprised that you guys look like us.
That's funny. Like, aliens are humanoid, Adam, because it's us. What are you talking about?
Humans are alienoid. Stop being dumb. Now, one of them was said to be female and had eggs inside. So that's cool, but people don't have eggs. So something isn't adding up if it's related to humans, but it has eggs. There's something else going on.
That's a Kinder Surprise.
So what evidence do we have that this might be legitimate? So Jamie Mosan said he did some DNA and carbon dating on the beings. Though those tests were not done on the two bodies which were presented in Mexico, but rather on another specimen, which he calls Victoria, which is still in Peru, which is where the other two were allegedly found. If what he's saying is true, then he took these two beings out of Peru, and some people aren't happy about that. Peruvian culture minister Leslie Ortega is asking how they left the country and says a criminal complaint has been filed.
It does seem a bit odd. Like, if they were found in Peru, like, why are they in Mexico?
Yeah, it's like, maybe you're lying, and if you're lying, you didn't do anything wrong. But if you're telling the truth, which you're not going to admit,
true.
Then
either way, yeah, there's some sketchiness here for sure.
He's kind of stuck, but it does seem. Anyway, we'll get to it later. It does seem that these are remains of something from Peru. So Masan claims to have done nothing illegal. He did not explain how they got into Mexico. It says he borrowed them from someone who has not been named. And I saw another report that said. For some other ones, a farmer gave them to them and wouldn't tell him where they came from. Wouldn't show him the cave they came from. I can't bring a can of shaving cream in a packed bag on a plane. And they asked me if I brought fruit or veggies into Canada if I go through the customs. So I don't know how this guy brought, these alien type beings.
I am curious as well. Like some sort of casket, like it was like a long bus ride.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he probably traveled by land, but still. So let's look at some of the science. We're all about science here. This is a really scientific issue. Jose de Jesus Zalce Benitez, the director of the Health Sciences Research Institute of the Secretary of the Navy, was at the hearings and had this to say. This is translated to English. Based on the DNA tests, which were compared with more than 1 million species, they are not related to what is known or described up to this moment by science or by human knowledge. They're probably explained by alien knowledge. If they're aliens, which they're probably not. Personally, I'd be just surprised if an alien had DNA at all. But we're not necessarily saying it's aliens again. Okay, so what about the carbon dating, which is said to prove that the specimens are about 1,000 years old? Why do we say about? Here we have an expert with some doubts. Julieta Fierro, a scientist at Mexico's National Autonomous Universities, UNAM, Institute of Astronomy, reviewed the test results. I saw a picture of that place recently.
I took that photo that you saw recently. I was there for a conference. It's a nice place.
Cool. No aliens while you were there?
It's classified.
That you know of. Like you could have talked to someone who was an alien, I guess.
I can't say anymore. Because there's nothing to say. That's why I can't.
She believes that the presence of carbon-14 in the studies proves that the samples were related to brain and skin tissues from different mummies who died at different times. But she takes issue with using carbon-14 dating at all, arguing, I think this is pretty smart, that if these were aliens, the amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere of an alien planet would not necessarily be the same as on Earth.
Oh, snap.
So to explain what this means, we need to kind of break down how carbon dating works. Radioactive carbon-14 is constantly created in Earth's atmosphere through interactions of cosmic rays and nitrogen in the atmosphere. This carbon then combines with oxygen to form CO2, carbon dioxide, which plants absorb through photosynthesis. An animal then consumes the plant. When a plant or animal dies, they stop taking in new carbon from the atmosphere, and then it goes through radioactive decay. We can use radio dating to measure the amount of carbon-14 and compare it to the amount of stable carbon-12 and carbon-13, which do not decay, and calculate the date of a being's death. So a plant or, a cow that's been eating things, or a human that eats plants, or an alien that eats plants.
An alien that eats cows.
So carbon-14 dating is reliable for time frames around 1,000 years, which is what's claimed in this specimen. The half-life of carbon-14 is about 5,730 years, so it works until about 50,000 years. So you do some math related to the amount of carbon-14 left in the organism, and you calculate its age. So it does rely on a few assumptions. She mentions that the carbon-14 concentration may be different on another planet, which is absolutely true. It's unique to our own planet's atmospheric composition and cosmic rays and things like that. Beyond that, the being would need to consume a plant, or a plant that came from another planet that had a different carbon-19 in its body. Alternatively, if this carbon is in the creature's body, this suggests not only that it lived and died on Earth, which is plausible, but in this case, that it consumed an Earth plant and absorbed the carbon through photosynthesis. So if he's claiming, there's a lot of assumptions for this carbon dating to work.
You know what they say about carbon dating? You are what you eat. That's a normal expression.
Could be now. So if these were aliens, would they be going around munching on Earth plants? I thought for sure they'd be feasting on the flesh of humans. Depends on the aliens.
Depends on the human.
So if that was the case, they'd likely be absorbing carbon, which had only recently started to decay if they were eating human bodies. But we didn't actually say they were aliens, but obviously they're aliens.
I'm not saying they're aliens, but...
So if I went to an alien planet, I would probably not eat the local, flora and fauna.
I don't know. Did you see the movie Prometheus? They were at an alien planet, and they just took off all their protective gear and just started touching stuff. That's how scientists work. That's exactly how a training for that mission would go.
In 2061, the Space Odyssey, the third one, there's a shark that eats a human body and just dies. It was like an alien creature. Eats a human body, just dies. Incompatible. Wouldn't work. I'm like, oh, Earth's so much smarter than most people were putting that in his book.
To be fair, did he cook the shark first? I mean, quite frankly, if I ate shark, I probably wouldn't do well either.
No, the shark alien ate a human.
Oh, I see.
And immediately dies.
Well, humans are repulsive.
In this case. That's what the people of Europa thought. So there is conflicting evidence over whether or not these specimens are legit. I mean, we can also weigh this against the general plausibility that these are what they are claimed to be. But before that, let's consider another factor. This is not the first time that Jamie Moussan has claimed to have exotic alien remains. He even once charged people money to see an alien corpse, which was later determined to be a human fetus. Let's look at what he got up to recently back in 2017 to get an idea of who we're dealing with. So, there were the 2017 Nazca mummies. It is worth noting that these alien mummies look very similar to the ones which were unveiled to Mexico's Congress in 2013. Those mummies were allegedly found in Peru. They were promoted by Jamie Moussan, who is the one presenting these new mummies to Congress. So he claims they're related. They're from the same place.
Remix.
Mm-hmm. Photos and x-rays of the specimens depicted humanoid, alien-looking mummies with long heads and three-fingered hands. They claimed that DNA testing, carbon testing, x-rays, and CT scans were done, but this data was not all shared with the scientific community. There were concerns that ancient mummies may have been desecrated to make these, and there are still such concerns. Some specific issues with the 2017 specimens, and I don't think I can properly encapsulate all of the problems with these, but I'll get into some. There were 4 different ones: Josephine, Albert, Evie, and Victoria. Analysis of these photos caused many to believe that these were assembled from various parts likely put together from animal and human remains. Upper arm bones appear to be human child-sized femurs. One leg uses the same bones flipped upside down and cut off, and another uses a tibia. So the legs don't match one to the other. And such a specimen could probably not walk properly. It didn't really have good joints.
So you're saying aliens have different legs?
I'm saying you don't need to walk when you're on a spaceship in zero gravity. The hands have various bones which appear more than once at different orientations. More specifically, they are human metacarpals and phalanges mixed together. And there's even some foot bones in the hands. Different hands are composed of different bones in different places, so there really isn't any consistency. They don't even have the same number of bones from different specimens. One is 31, one has 27, one has 24.
Everyone's unique, like a snowflake.
Yeah, maybe these aliens are...
one of a kind, Adam.
I don't know. The elongated head resembles part of a llama or alpaca.
Sorry. I don't know. It's like, where's this from? Peru? Oh, well, for some reason, purely coincidental, this looks a lot like a llama's neck.
Yeah, so it looks like a llama or alpaca skull, which had parts broken off. Coincidentally, there have been buried llama mummies unearthed in Peru. Wow.
I'm just shocked. I'm just shocked.
What are the odds?
Alpaca it in.
There isn't consistency in the placement of the bones, orientation of the bones, or even the types of bones between specimens or even from one side to another. So really not convincing specimens. Surely this all seems silly, but there's a link to a Reddit post on r/alien subreddit that shows a lot of this. There's also a video that I've linked that shows some of the details and an article that gives a lot of detail about this bones analysis from multiple people looking at it. It's fairly clearly a mishmash of parts fabricated to look like something it isn't by someone who doesn't have a very good grasp of anatomy.
That is a good summary.
Yeah. So specifically, bones from human children and of various ages and or young animals were used here. Besides these tiny specimens, there was something called the three-fingered humans, so human-sized mummies with only small differences, so elongated skulls and three fingers. Pre-Columbian mummies in Peru often featured skull deformation, so these may have been modified to pass them off to be slightly more alien-looking, so these might have just been, slightly modified mummies. So similar to the newer specimen, there was some carbon dating done on some of the 2017 mummies. Carbon dating of the specimen Wawita seems to be from around 1300 to 1400 AD. But Wawita's fur is older, so dating from about 890 to 1010 AD. If it were a single life form, there shouldn't be that inconsistency. Another specimen, Maria, seems older, dating from around 250 to 400 AD. This does not simply indicate that the specimens are about 1,000 years old, but rather that they are forgeries assembled from parts of different organisms which died at different times. Mm-hmm. And if I'd done that, why would I subject them to carbon dating if I knew that that would come up?
So many different types of people in this world.
Mm-hmm. Aliens, humans.
Non-human aliens, non-alien humans, yes.
We also don't have clear evidence of where these were from, like I mentioned. A farmer brought these mummies to the researchers, said they came from Peru, didn't bring them to the cave where they came from. A little silly. Since the 2017 and the 2023 specimens are so similar, it seems we are dealing with the same ones or some that are made in similar ways, perhaps similar forgeries. If not, it would be a very odd coincidence for someone to come up with a hoax specimen, which gets disproved, and then to later find a real alien which actually looks almost identical to the older hoax ones.
That does seem unlikely. Yes. I agree with you.
And he's also not making that claim. He claims that they're related. They're from the same place.
Of course,
they're similar.
Same alpaca.
Jamie Mosan had scientists back up his claim, and said that the new specimens were authentic. He showed a DNA analysis that showed that they are only a 3% match with humans. But what would this even mean? There's nothing on Earth that has a 3% match with humans, right?
Yeah, 3% what? It's like, well, it's a 97% match with an alpaca. So it's like, it isn't human. Like, yeah, it's a llama. Llama face.
Now, there are, of course, many scientists who are rejecting these new specimens as likely being hoax. And it seems unnecessary to go through the same round of detailed analysis about these latest specimens. And I think people aren't doing that detailed analysis because they're kind of like, we know what's going on. The 2017 ones were obvious forgeries. The 2023 ones are certainly the same by the most basic logic. We can discount these in the same way. If aliens exist, they are certainly not whatever was unveiled in Mexican Congress late last year.
Bold claim.
These beings were never claimed to have been aliens, but whatever their supposed origin is, they don't even appear to be authentic life forms. These forgeries are more or less puppets assembled from various pieces of bone from children and animals with little consistency or understanding of anatomy. If the truth is out there, it's certainly not here.
Bazinga. You know, as you're going through your segment, I couldn't help but feel bad for the person who has real alien remains and like, this guy's giving me a bad name. I was just about to unveil mine to the Congress of Panama. Pick another country, why not? And it's like, oh, these seem very Chilean. No, look, that's just coincidental.
Hopefully they don't look like a weird Shrill BT.
And so, you know, if this guy sincerely has these beliefs, that's its own sort of ridiculousness. If he doesn't, like, do you just need attention? Like, what is going on here? It's so weird, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and I also think that people don't realize just how sophisticated scientific techniques of analyzing bones are, right? Like, so people who really know what they're doing, they know what they're doing, right? Like, oh, this is a little fragment of bone. That means from this age, from this time, from so on. Right. When like the average person's like, yeah, it looks about the same. I'll just stick it in there. You're like, no. It doesn't work that way. People know how the bones work and how they function and approximately what age they existed in.
Yeah, and these are only going off of X-rays. Like, they didn't give many scientists access to the actual bones and the specimens, right? Not scientists who were likely to disagree with them.
Of course. Well, just it's been a hard evening then. I feel my hope in the world of alien remains has been shattered. Well, thank you, Adam. It seems like there weren't alien remains there, and well, he may not outlive that criticism, but the book Outlive by Peter Attia was pretty good. I'm going to give a quick book review of Peter Attia's Outlive, the science of longevity and living a better life and that sort of thing. In short, this is a solid book that provides a good assessment of the recent science and scientific understanding regarding how to have a healthier lifespan. Not just living longer, but living better for longer. Despite being a highly atypical person, Peter Attia is pretty obsessed and does a lot of extreme sports and constantly challenges himself and is willing to track a lot of different data about himself. He's a reasonable guide, and it was a pleasurable listening experience. Quickly behind the scenes, he admits he did a first pass at the audio and it wasn't good, and they had a voice coach come in. I was like, oh, it must be nice to have a voice coach. No bitterness. Most of y'all know the basics to living better. Exercise, don't eat too much junk or too much food in general, get some good sleep, and mental and emotional wellness is also important. Attia thinks exercise is the most important thing that one can do to improve their health and longevity. Really, really hitting that point repeatedly. Yeah. Attia believes that exercise is so important, he would exercise even if it took a year off his total lifespan. So he's trying to say the benefits are so high for so many organs and everything else in your life and what you're capable of doing, it's worth it even if it shortens your life, which very few people make that claim. So all I have to say is he's all in on exercise for sure.
I really like the way he kind of explained that the reason people's health often deteriorates is because they have a health problem that makes them unable to be active or unable to exercise, and that causes further health problems. It really drills down this important point that being active is what keeps people healthy, and being inactive is what can lead people to be unhealthy and die.
Downward spirals for sure. So the book is more about health than longevity, as some people conceptualize it. Many moons ago, I read David Sinclair's Lifespan, and that was far more about like really pushing the limits of aging and whatnot. When Attia is kind of like, let me just try to have you have a better, healthy existence, and maybe you get to live to 80, 90, or 100. I did find Attia to be one of the more trustworthy voices than others in the health space. That said, you know, there's always disagreement. There's a lot of problems methodologically with a lot of the research. But why I liked Attia is that he'll often point out those problems or say like, this is what the consensus is and this is why I disagree with it. Or there's not that much evidence for this. And when I've heard him interviewed on other podcasts, like he did an interview with Sam Harris on Sam Harris's podcast, which was great. He'll like Sam Harris like, what about this thing? He's like, well, look, I don't think there's any good evidence right now that says you should take it. I think that evidence is probably 5 years away, but I do take it. Like, That's what I want from someone. Yeah. I want that honesty of saying like, I don't necessarily have good reasons for you to take it. I think it's years away, but here's still why I take it. And like, okay, good. Versus someone kind of selling something. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're all selling something. So that's, the asterisk here no matter what, right? Prevention is another key aspect of the book. So really the theme here is if you can make it so you don't get sick or ill or injured in the first place, you will do much better in life. Mm-hmm. And related to that is testing and understanding what your current health state is, tracking different indicators, whether it's blood glucose or, arteriosclerosis or different blood pressure or heart issues or everything else, right? He uses an example which makes a convincing point that if you go into the doctor and you have a test, say for cholesterol, something like that, whether it's too high or too not, and it's just below the level where it's the threshold for doing something, that means often nothing is done. Yeah. Like say you're a 135 is bad. I'm just making up the number now. And you have like, I got a 133. Like, okay, no problem. Come back later. Like, well, wait a minute. You were so close. Why wouldn't we start treating it as if it's a problem versus coming back later? Now it's 135, 140, and you already could have been acting. So in this sense, we should see things as a continuum, which I definitely believe in. Sort of like, yes, the 0.05 significance level in a lot of psychology is useful, but just because something's slightly below or slightly above doesn't mean we should treat it dramatically differently.
Yeah, it was funny. It's like, why will you wait till something's a problem that needs to be treated when action now can make sure that it's 10, 20 years away instead of 5 years away. And then in 5 years, you have no choice but to do it with it. It's a very different way of thinking of things. And I think practically, I don't know that I can do much with that. I don't think I can walk into my doctor's office and be like, hey, I read this book and like, can you check all these things for me? I don't even know what they mean, but tell me if there's like indicators of all these health issues. Right.
That is an issue. So depending on which country you're in, which tests are available, which doctor's willing to go through it, and can you analyze it yourself, we are relatively constrained. Yeah. I do know someone who paid, like there's a private clinic relatively near here for like a DEXA scan, which is a different way of analyzing your body, who could analyze some of this stuff. But yeah, it does require more resources, either time, attention, knowledge, sophistication, access to sophistication. That's the other thing. So Attia has all these recommendations like, yeah, if you're rich or if you have lots of time or if, my friend did it. Like, your friend, the world famous doctor who you all hang out with each other, right?
So if we could all go to his clinic, right, it would be great.
Right. His therapist, Esther Perel, like the world famous Esther Perel, or like Hugh Jackman's like, he's my doctor. I like him. He's great. You're like, okay, sure. You're hanging out with Hugh Jackman. Fine. I don't get to hang out with Hugh Jackman at all. Anyway. I really liked his focus on something he calls the centenarian decathlon. And this is the idea that what are the things you want to do at the age of 100? A list of 10 exercises you'd still like to be able to do or perform when you're 100 years old. Now, I know maybe you can lower that down to like 70, 80, 90, whatever you want to make it more realistic. But what do you want to do? Like literally do, like, I don't know, pick up my grandchild, or as he says, like carry my luggage up to the overhead bin on an airplane if I want to go on vacation, or I know mobility, basic mobility, right? What are all the things you want to do when you're older, and have that list. And if you want to do those things, that means now, might be 30s, 40s, 50s, you should be doing exercises now, which are more difficult, of course, right? So then you're building up the muscle, which does deteriorate over time. So I think this is very useful. It's very practical, right? It doesn't, it's not a one size fits all, because like, well, what do you want to do? What is your life? What is your goals? And then like work backwards from that. Near the end of the book, Attia discusses some of his personal issues. And although this sort of doesn't quite fit with the rest of the book, I thought it was interesting and important nonetheless. We humans are quirky creatures. Attia has had some trauma in his life, and he only seemed to realize this much later in his life, despite his friends trying to urge him and him having overt incidents where he had to go into some sort of counseling. But that wasn't enough the first time around, and it took him a while to realize it. Why this is interesting to me, just aside from like psychological curiosity, is Attia really seems to be one of the most obsessive, capable, analytical people around. He's tracking all sorts of indicators across numerous domains, and yet was completely oblivious to his own emotional trauma. It's like he lacked introspective capacity despite having so much capacity in so many other domains. And this isn't a criticism. It's just like, oh yes, we all have blind spots, and we're all in a journey of trying to grow more and heal ourselves and so on. It was just interesting. And also I have sympathy that, okay, even if someone as capable as him has trouble dealing with this, we should think even more so of giving leeway and understanding to other people. I mean, the book does describe in terms of just his general capacity, not this emotional issue. He's like, so I went for a 10-hour swim. Like, this is a story in the book, right? And I was swimming for 10 hours, and then afterwards I was eating a hamburger, and my wife's like, hey, have you considered being less not thin? And he's like, hey, I just went for like a 10-hour swim. But then he's like, yeah, you know what? I have been gaining some weight. right? So again, most humans on Earth could not go for a 10-hour swim at all. Like, he's so atypical. That's why, like, is this really going to generalize to anyone? So all that to say is, I don't think the obsessive tracking, the obsessiveness for almost everything that he does is a natural tendency that most people have, and they have different childhood experiences. But I thought it is useful overall to communicate the basics that we all know, but we don't do. And when I had my book group, we're all like, yeah, I'm going to try to do the healthier thing again. So sometimes that's what's necessary. We know the thing to do, we just don't do it. So you need a kick in the butt one way or another. The other thing that I did like is Attia is a medical doctor. He's done some medical research. He also did some risk analysis, like in an investment firm. And that, hard to say because it's just inferring a lot here, but that made me trust him a little bit more, because a lot of science involves stats to understand what's really going on. And if you're doing some sort of quantitative analysis in an investment firm, you probably understand the math a bit better than most. So I just thought that added a bit of credibility. In short, I thought it was a great book, and there's a reason why it sold like 1 million copies.
Yeah, I read it too. I enjoyed it as well. Practical advice. I try to get a lot of exercise, and you just kind of take people's word on, exercise is good for living longer and stuff like that. But like, he demonstrates it very well, and I really appreciated that. And he talks about food. He talks about, and just this basic idea of like, you want your mental health to be good. You want to be happy. It's useless to live forever if you're miserable.
Right. As someone else said, like, well, why are you trying to live so long if you're not happy? I said it to him. And it seemed like for many decades he wasn't.
Yeah.
And I should say that these are the general higher level points that I'm extracting that I fully support and agree with. While some of the more detailed things, like whether everyone should be doing blood glucose monitoring, well, I could see that being useful for some people. I could see that being very difficult for other people. Can they interpret it? Are they willing to go through the hassle? Is the technology there? Insulin, of course, is important. Are people going to monitor to the same extent? I think if you're already like sort of maxing out all the other good things you're supposed to be doing, then maybe start moving that direction. Mm-hmm. But if you're currently struggling with the walk around the block stuff, or you're still trying to not eat too much junk food, well, that. Just work on that as opposed to worrying about getting a specific monitoring device and spending more money for all these extra tests. Well, thank you for joining us once again, listeners. Adam gave us a long exploration of why there weren't aliens presented to the Congress of Mexico, and I gave a short book review of Peter Attia's Outlive. Until next time, think better to act better.
As cuboids.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
So if these I keep calling them aliens.
Stop being so biased, Adam.
I'm trying to normalize the idea that they're aliens. So similar to the newer specimen, there was some carbon dating done to the 2017 muffin. I don't know what that was.
Oh, if there were some muffins all of a sudden, that'd be delicious.
I was thinking of the file segment.
Oh, yeah.